young black woman steps into a crowded airport terminal holding a first-class ticket, expecting nothing more than a quiet journey to London. But when a veteran pilot sees her and assumes she doesn't belong, a simple boarding process turns into a public humiliation. What no one knows is that she's not just any passenger. She's the silent force behind the very airline they're flying. As egos clash and truths unravel at 35,000 feet, the line between perception and reality begins to blur. What happens when power hides behind humility and arrogance gets caught in the act? Sasha Patterson had learned long ago the power of being underestimated. It started in boardrooms where men twice her age and half her insight mistook her silence for inexperience. It continued in supplier meetings, where her directness was interpreted as rudeness, and again in legal negotiations where her youth and skin tone drew second glances, followed always by third and fourth when they realized just how badly they'd misread her. But those moments, the ones where perception collapsed under the weight of truth, were her favorite. They never saw her coming, and that was precisely why she traveled the way she did. Hoodie, joggers, a plain carry-on, and no entourage. No flashy name tag, no security detail. Not even a personal assistant in tow. Just Sasha, always observing, always watching. She stood near Gate C12 of Hargrave International Airport, shifting her weight from one foot to the other as boarding announcements echoed overhead. Her phone buzzed, a calendar alert reminding her of the board meeting she'd be skipping tomorrow. A small smirk tugged at the corner of her lips. She already knew what they'd say in her absence. Let's table this until Sasha returns. She liked testing her own systems, the anonymous check-ins, the unscheduled routes. It told her more about how her airline truly operated than any spreadsheet could. And today it was Skyward Atlantic Flight 309 to London, flagship route, first class, full suite. The newest aircraft in the fleet. The gate was congested, and the chaos was exactly what she wanted to see. Passengers argued quietly about boarding zones. A mother hushed her toddler with snacks. A business traveler clacked on a laptop with a cracked hinge. Sasha absorbed it all like sunlight, unbothered. She caught sight of the gate agent, Mia Sanders if her badge was accurate, trying to juggle a glitchy scanner and an impatient elderly couple asking about wheelchair assistance. Sasha made a mental note to ensure the staffing matrix allowed more flexibility for these crunch time moments. She would have stepped in to help if she thought it wouldn't draw attention. Instead, she waited. Then the air changed. The kind of shift you feel before a storm. Captain Douglas Reardon emerged from the jet bridge with a posture that demanded attention. He wasn't just walking, he was parading. Crisp navy uniform cutting a path through the terminal's fluorescent glare, gold stripes at the cuff, epaulets sharp as blades, hair swept back like a retired soap opera star. He glanced left and right, like royalty surveying his domain, the terminal bending subtly around his stride. His eyes caught Sasha in passing. They lingered, just long enough. Her hoodie wasn't designer. Her joggers had a small stain from an airport coffee earlier that morning. No makeup, no jewelry. Nothing to indicate that she was the principal investor and CEO of Skyward Atlantic Holdings. Just a black woman in economy attire, standing alone near the first-class boarding zone, looking entirely out of place. And Captain Reardon hated things out of place. He moved toward the gate desk, eyes flicking to the tablet in Mia's hands. "You're calling Group 1 next, correct?" he asked, his voice low but edged. Mia nodded, flustered. "Yes, sir. Just a couple of priority passengers left, and then—" "Be precise," Reardon cut her off. "We don't need another delay like Boston last week." Sasha kept her gaze straight ahead, phone in hand, pretending not to listen, though every word etched itself into her memory. "Ma'am," Mia called gently, finally making eye contact. "We're now boarding Group 1. You can go ahead." Sasha stepped forward, presenting her phone screen without saying a word. Reardon's arm came down like a crossing gate. "Hold on." His tone wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. It was the kind of tone that came loaded with authority, expected to be obeyed without question. Sasha looked up, calmly, not moving her phone. "Is there an issue?" Reardon didn't answer her. He turned to Mia instead. "Double-check the manifest. This is for seat 1A." "No, sir," Mia said slowly. "Passenger S. Patterson. She's assigned to 2A." "Exactly," Reardon snapped, like he'd solved something. "Then perhaps Miss Patterson can explain how she acquired a $12,000 0-cents ticket without even bothering to dress the part." The gate fell silent. A businessman nearby lowered his phone mid-text. A teenager in headphones pulled one earbud out. Sasha simply blinked. Reardon reached out and snatched the phone from her hand before she could respond. With a practiced flick, he tore the digital pass into 2 sections. Metaphorically, of course, since it was a phone, but the gesture was unmistakable, dominant, dismissive. "This is a high-sensity aircraft, ma'am," he added, voice laced with false courtesy. "I'm going to need you to step aside while we verify your identity." A flicker of something passed through Mia's eyes. Concern, hesitation, but she said nothing. Sasha reached for her phone, retrieved it from his hand without raising her voice. "There's no need," she said. "I'll wait right here." "Security will be notified," Reardon said as he walked away, and then over his shoulder, almost as an afterthought, "You can't just wander into first class because you feel entitled to it." He didn't see her eyes narrow. He didn't see the barely perceptible shift in her posture. But he would remember it. Sasha stepped back from the gate, pulled out a secondary phone, and tapped once. Then she waited. 10 feet away, passengers murmured. Someone whispered, "That didn't feel right." Another muttered something about lawsuits. The intercom buzzed overhead with another boarding call, and the line inched forward, but the rhythm of the terminal had changed. Reardon had seen to that. And Sasha? She had no intention of walking away. She let 30 seconds pass before glancing at her screen. A single message appeared in blue. 10 minutes. Kendra's en route. She slid the phone back into her hoodie pocket. The chaos around her didn't matter anymore. The wheels were already turning. Because this wasn't just about her seat. It wasn't about one captain's ego. It wasn't even about the torn digital ticket. It was about the quiet rot that grew when no one challenged it. Sasha Patterson had built Skyward Atlantic with precision, vision, and discipline. And today she would burn a hole through the surface to expose the part people didn't see. She folded her arms and waited. And across the terminal, Captain Reardon smirked, still utterly convinced he was in control. He had no idea how far out of altitude he really was. Captain Douglas Reardon wasn't a cruel man, at least not by his own estimation. He was precise, orderly, a man who'd earned every gold stripe on his sleeve through 32 years of military and commercial service. He believed in protocols, and more than that, he believed in image. An airline was only as respectable as the image it projected, and if there was one thing Reardon couldn't abide, it was a first-class cabin that didn't look first class. So when he spotted the girl at the front of the line, hoodie, sneakers, no visible brand recognition to speak of, it felt like a direct challenge to everything he'd worked to maintain, the authority, the hierarchy, the unspoken decorum of air travel. Maybe in economy appearances didn't matter, but up front, where champagne flowed and eye contact was currency, it mattered. To him, it mattered deeply. The captain's lounge was 2 corridors down from gate C12, quiet and sterile as a vacuum. Reardon stepped inside, closing the door behind him and ignoring the faint hum of boarding calls outside. He pulled out his iPad and opened the flight manifest, swiping past the names without care. S. Patterson. The name meant nothing to him. No executive flags, no known VIP codes. Not that he would have looked closely anyway. Still, something about the situation gnawed at him, not because he feared being wrong, but because the girl hadn't reacted. No raised voice, no threat, no tears, just silence. The calm ones always worried him more than the loud ones. They were the ones with plans. He reached for the phone to notify his first officer when a quiet knock tapped the glass behind him. Back at the gate, Sasha remained exactly where she'd stood when Reardon walked away. A few passengers shuffled past her, avoiding her eyes. Others glanced over, then quickly looked down at their boarding passes, like the situation might be contagious. She didn't move. Mia, still behind the gate counter, looked like she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the nerve. Instead, she kept her focus locked on the scanner, one beep after another. One seat closer to liftoff, one step closer to pretending nothing happened. Sasha let the silence hang between them until the moment she heard soft footsteps approaching from her left. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. Kendra Ellis, legal bulldog in ballet flats, arrived without a word. Dressed in a slate-gray blazer and simple blouse, Kendra looked less like a corporate lawyer and more like someone about to host a TED Talk on corporate ethics. Her eyes moved slowly, absorbing the room. She saw Sasha. She saw Mia. She saw the thin layer of tension hovering in the air like unspoken smoke. She stepped beside Sasha and folded her hands in front of her. "How long?" she asked, quiet but clipped. Sasha didn't answer at first. Then, without looking away from the gate, "About 10 minutes, he tore the pass." Kendra nodded once. "That was reckless." Sasha's voice stayed even. "That was expected." Across the terminal, a small boy dropped his juice box. A mother scolded gently. Life continued. The man with the shotgun said, inside the captain's lounge, Reardon checked his watch, frustrated that operations hadn't called him back. He didn't like delays. He especially didn't like unexplained ones, even if he'd been the one to cause it. The lounge door opened behind him. "Captain Reardon," came a voice he didn't recognize. "I'd like a moment of your time." He turned and saw Kendra. Something in her presence cut the air cleanly, the way only people with undeniable authority could. "I don't believe we've met," he said. "You haven't," Kendra replied. "But I'm sure that's about to change." She stepped forward, extending a business card with slow precision. He didn't reach for it. Instead, he glanced at the embossed logo and frowned. "You're legal?" "General counsel for Skyward Atlantic Holdings," she said smoothly. "I represent Miss Sasha Patterson, who, you may not know, is your employer." Reardon let out a soft chuckle. "Excuse me." Sasha walked in. She didn't speak, didn't even glance at him at first, just moved to the far side of the lounge and leaned against the window, arms folded. Kendra didn't smile. "I'm here to clarify a few things," she continued, her tone professionally devoid of emotion. "First, the woman you publicly embarrassed at Gate C-12, without cause or protocol, is the CEO and principal shareholder of this airline. Second, the flight manifest you so carelessly ignored was confirmed this morning by Central Scheduling. Third—" "This is absurd," Reardon cut in. "No one informed me of any corporate inspection." "They weren't supposed to," Sasha said, turning finally. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp enough to slice glass. "That's the point." Reardon faltered, just slightly. "You came dressed like that?" Sasha tilted her head, like she was studying something under a microscope. "You mean, like a passenger?" He stiffened. "I mistook you for someone trying to sneak into first class. You must understand how that looks." "I do," she said. "I understand perfectly." A long silence stretched across the room. The only sound was the faint echo of final boarding announcements in the distance. Reardon straightened. "Well, now that I've been corrected. I'll escort you to your seat. I can offer a verbal apology to the passengers." "No, you won't," Kendra said flatly. "You're not flying this plane." Reardon turned sharply. "Excuse me?" "The decision's already made," she continued. "You've been removed from this flight. Captain Leyland will assume command. He's waiting on standby." "That's outrageous," Reardon snapped. "You can't just replace a senior captain minutes before takeoff. This is protocol. There's union review, procedures." "And there will be," Kendra said. "You'll have ample opportunity to discuss it in your formal hearing." Reardon looked at Sasha. "You're really doing this?" "I didn't do anything," she replied. "You did." For a moment, something shifted behind his eyes. Not regret, not understanding, just the slow, dull realization that the ground had moved beneath him. Kendra stepped aside. Reardon hesitated, then gathered his cap and walked toward the door without another word. The click of it closing behind him was the only punctuation the moment needed. Back at the gate, Mia was still scanning the last few passengers when Sasha and Kendra returned. The agent looked up, pale and jittery. I didn't know," she stammered. "I'm so sorry. I should have—" Sasha stopped her with a raised hand. "You did your job," she said. "But next time, if something doesn't feel right, trust yourself, not the rank." Mia nodded slowly. Sasha held up her phone again. "Can you scan me in?" Mia took the device, her hands trembling just slightly. The scanner beeped once. "Clean and final. Welcome aboard, Miss Patterson." Sasha stepped through the gate. Behind her, a few passengers exchanged whispers, unsure of what they'd just witnessed. One man, Eli Townsend, a tech exec who recognized Sasha from a Forbes article, watched her walk onto the plane with a slow nod. He didn't say anything, but he'd seen enough to know that something important had just happened. And he wasn't the only one. The cabin door hissed closed with a subtle click, sealing off the rest of the terminal like a chapter snapping shut. Sasha settled into seat 2A, her back easing against the custom-stitched leather, the faint scent of cedar and citrus clinging to the fresh press of the cabin air. The suite around her was one she'd personally approved just 8 months earlier, right down to the champagne holder recessed beside the touchscreen panel. She didn't touch it. Not yet. Across the aisle, the other first-class passengers gave her careful glances. Not judgmental, just curious. One or two of them had witnessed the exchange at the gate, though none had intervened. It was always that way. People watched, but very few acted. One seat over, Eli Townsend pretended to fiddle with his smartwatch, but his gaze kept drifting. Sasha noticed. She didn't mind. Recognition could be a useful thing when it came from the right places. A voice chimed in overhead. It wasn't Captain Reardon. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Leyland. I'll be filling in for today's journey to London. We're scheduled for an on-time departure in smooth skies with an estimated flight time of 6 hours and 20 minutes. Flight crew, prepare for takeoff." Short. Measured. Void of ego. Sasha exhaled. Flight attendants moved through the cabin with polite urgency, performing final checks. The doors sealed. Engines began to whine. As the aircraft pulled back from the gate, she finally reached for her seatbelt and clicked it in place. Her phone buzzed again, a message from Kendra. David's looped in. Followed by a second, "We may need a statement. Not yet, but soon." Sasha didn't reply. She just let the messages hang there in her peripheral vision while she stared out the window. The airport rolled past in a blur. Other planes, other gates, other people with places to be. All of it shrunk to nothing as the jet turned, paused, and surged forward. Takeoff came like a shift in gravity, smooth and clean. For the first time that morning, Sasha let herself lean back. She didn't need to rehearse what came next. The playbook was written long ago. The real question was whether anyone else on this flight knew they were now in the opening act of something much bigger. 20 rows back in economy, A teenage girl tapped on her phone with both thumbs. Her name was Kaylee Simmons. She hadn't meant to record anything at first. She just liked watching people. Her phone had already been out when Captain Reardon started raising his voice at the woman in the hoodie. She'd caught the moment he tore the boarding pass. She'd captured the silence that followed, the frozen gate agent, the way the woman didn't flinch. She hadn't posted the video yet. But she'd replayed it 4 times already, and something about it just felt wrong. She didn't know who the woman was, but she wanted to. Back up in first class, Sasha reached into the side panel and pulled out a pair of headphones. She didn't turn them on. She just wore them like a shield. Across the aisle, Eli cleared his throat. "I hope you don't mind," he said softly. "I recognized you from the Business Now conference last fall." She looked over. "You were on the automation panel." "Guilty." He smiled. "Eli Townsend, Valortech." Sasha didn't extend her hand, but she gave a small nod. "Sasha Patterson. I figured. I just wanted to say I saw what happened out there, at the gate." Sasha raised an eyebrow. "Did you?" Eli caught the edge in her tone and didn't flinch. "I did. And I didn't step in. I won't pretend that didn't happen too." That earned him a longer glance. He continued a bit quieter. "People freeze when they see things like that. They're scared to be wrong or to get involved. I'm not excusing it, just acknowledging it." Sasha turned back toward the window. "Acknowledgement is the start, not the solution." "I know." Eli paused. "If there's anything I can do, let me know, especially once the media catches wind." She said nothing, but after a moment she added, "You'll know when." The flight attendants returned with pre-meal service, offering champagne and chilled towels. Sasha declined both. She wasn't in the mood for rituals, not yet. A few rows behind her, Kylie clicked post. She didn't add a caption, just uploaded the clip and let it speak for itself. 10 seconds of raw video. A pilot tearing a boarding pass, a woman standing silent. The moment stretching far too long. Within 7 minutes, it had been reposted 34 times. By the time the plane reached cruising altitude, Gate C-12 was already trending in 3 cities. Down in the airline's central HQ, David Knox sat behind his sleek walnut desk, watching alerts pop up like wildfire across his secondary monitor. Tweets, threads, mentions, passenger commentary. One video had crossed 18,000 views in under an hour. No tags, no context. But the footage was unmistakable. He rubbed his temples, then reached for the phone. "Kendra," he said as soon as she picked up, "we're live." "How bad?" "Not a wildfire yet, but the brush is dry and the matches are falling." "Containment?" "I'll start soft. A holding statement, non-specific. Acknowledge a policy review. Emphasize commitment to passenger dignity." "Good," Kendra said. "Don't invoke Sasha's name yet. Let the story build naturally." David nodded, already typing. "And David," she added, "this doesn't go away quietly. Not this time." He already knew that. Sasha wasn't just another executive. She wasn't a photopop CEO or a diversity hire or a figurehead. She'd earned every square inch of her power, every zero in her portfolio, and every ounce of fear she inspired in boardrooms full of men who still thought they ran the show. And now the world was going to meet her. Up in the air, the hum of the engines grew quieter in Sasha's ears as she finally allowed herself to drift, not asleep, not yet, but into that half-focus where her mind did its best work. Plans clicked into place behind her eyes, strategies assembled like puzzle pieces. She didn't need revenge. She needed clarity. She needed change. And she knew exactly how to get it. What Captain Reardon had failed to realize was that he hadn't embarrassed her. He'd exposed himself. And Sasha was going to make sure everyone saw what was really underneath that perfect uniform and polished smile. As the plane sped forward through a sky too blue to notice the turmoil below, she let her eyes close for just a moment. It was going to be a long flight, but not nearly as long as the landing. The moment the wheels touched the runway at Langston Heathrow, a low rustle of movement stirred the cabin. Phones came alive like insects, buzzing and lighting up as passengers reacquainted themselves with gravity and connectivity. Sasha remained still in her seat, her fingers laced together loosely on her lap. She didn't reach for her phone. She already knew what she would find. But 2 rows behind her, Kaylee Simmons was gasping. "Mom," she whispered, holding up her screen, eyes wide. "She's on the news." Her mother didn't respond, too busy texting her boss to arrange a pickup. Kaylee turned to the screen again, refreshing. The video she'd uploaded had gone viral. 2 million views. Headlines spinning, a major airline scandal, a racial profiling accusation, and now, CEO revealed? She hadn't even known the woman's name when she'd posted the clip. Now everyone knew. The terminal staff waiting at the jet bridge shifted nervously as the plane pulled in. One of them had already received a whisper through their earpiece. "She's on this flight." They didn't need clarification on who she was. By now, every employee in Skyward Atlantic's international division had seen the footage or heard the fallout. HR was scrambling, internal comms were in overdrive, and Captain Reardon? Reassigned, pending investigation. As the door opened and the first-class passengers began to deplane, Sasha stood, calm as ever. Her bag slung over one shoulder, hoodie zipped, eyes forward. She moved like a shadow, silent, self-contained. But the atmosphere around her pulsed with electricity. One of the attendants at the front cleared her throat. "Miss Patterson?" she asked, almost timid. Sasha paused. "Yes?" "There's a car waiting for you at arrivals, and a team member from London Ops. They'll escort you." Sasha nodded once. "Thank you." She didn't need the escort, but she understood the gesture. Skyward Atlantic was trying to get ahead of the narrative. Too late for that. Eli Townsend caught up with her just before baggage claim. "I'm not usually the type to linger," he said, adjusting his shoulder bag, "but I had to see how this played out." Sasha gave him a side glance. "We're still in the middle of it." "I know," Eli said, "which is why I'm glad you're steering." She didn't smile, but the corner of her mouth lifted slightly. "You planning to invest?" "I'm planning to watch closely," he replied, "and speak loudly when it matters." They parted with a nod. No business cards, no performative handshakes, just a mutual understanding, forged in turbulence. At the exit, Kendra was already waiting, her tablet in one hand, coat in the other, standing next to a black car with dark windows. Sasha approached without speaking. They both climbed into the back seat, and the door shut with a heavy thud. The car pulled into traffic. "We have 4 major outlets requesting statements," Kendra began immediately. "The Times, Bloomberg, World Talk, and Channel 9. The clip has been broadcast in over 40 markets, and Skyward's name is trending with 3 hashtags, all centered on race and executive bias." Sasha looked out the window. "And Reardon?" The lawyered up. "Smart ones, too. He's going to spin this into a misunderstanding. He'll say he was following protocol, defending the sanctity of the cockpit, the usual defense playbook." "Let him," Sasha said. Kendra nodded slowly. "HR and legal want your guidance. They're waiting." "I'm not going to fire him," Sasha said. "Not yet." Kendra didn't hide her surprise. "You're not? I'm going to make sure everyone sees what happens when men like that think they're untouchable. If I terminate him now, it becomes a scapegoat story. Another one-day scandal. He disappears into retirement and nothing changes. But if we let the process unfold, show every layer of what's broken and how it's handled, then it becomes something else." Kendra sat back. You want to make him the face of the rot." Sasha turned toward her. "No, I want to make the system the face of the rot. He's just the crack that let the light in." Back at Skyward's global headquarters in Atlanta, David Knox was buried in a storm of PR responses, strategic drafts, and internal memos. His eyes stung from the backlight of his monitor. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he weighed the tone of the holding statement for the 5th time. It had to walk a line. If they defended Reardon, they'd be complicit. If they attacked him too early, it would reek of damage control. The goal wasn't to erase what happened. The goal was to prove the company wasn't afraid to confront it. He clicked open the draft titled "Integrity in Action," an immediate commitment to review. He read through it again. Then he deleted the title entirely. This wasn't about performance, it was about truth. He typed, "To our passengers, employees, and communities. Yesterday, something happened that violated the values we claim to uphold. A woman was profiled, a leader was underestimated, and a trust was broken. We're not here to apologize and move on. We're here to acknowledge, investigate, and repair, and you will see every step we take. Because real trust isn't declared, it's earned." He hit send. Later that afternoon, in a quiet meeting room inside the company's London operations hub, Sasha sat at the head of a long table. Senior staff dialed in from across 3 time zones, some on video, others audio only. The topic was no longer whether they'd respond. It was how bold they were willing to be. She let them talk first. Legal advised caution. HR advised discretion. International relations suggested a wait-and-see approach. And when they were finished, Sasha spoke. "I built Skyward to be different," she said, her voice low, unwavering. "Not just sleeker planes and better champagne. I built it so we didn't have to pretend, so that passengers like me didn't have to wear suits to be respected. I won't be the silent owner anymore. Not if silence means complicity." One of the board members, an older man from the Chicago branch, cleared his throat. "Ms. Patterson, you're absolutely right, but might I suggest, privately, we avoid too much personalization in this messaging, that we keep the focus on the airline." Sasha leaned forward. "I am the airline," she said. "There is no message without the messenger." No one spoke after that. Not for a long while. And then, slowly, one by one, they began to agree. As the meeting ended, Sasha looked out at the sky through the glass wall. Planes took off in the distance, climbing into blue, disappearing into the unknown. There was a storm beneath those clouds, but she was done flying under radar. And this time, the world would see her at altitude. The panel room was colder than it needed to be, and Captain Douglas Reardon hated that he noticed it. He sat stiffly in a chair far less comfortable than the pilot's seat he was used to, hands folded on the table before him, jaw clenched tight. Across from him, the inquiry board's 3-member panel waited in unreadable silence while the HR rep adjusted the microphone, her hands trembling slightly from nerves. There was no denying it anymore. The hierarchy had shifted, and Reardon, once king of the cockpit, now sat on the other side of command. A small plaque in front of him read simply, "Review Hearing. Flight 5319 Incident Flight 309. The room wasn't public, no cameras, no press, but it may as well have been on stage because he knew what was happening outside its 4 glass walls. The headlines had grown louder with each passing hour. Airline CEO profiled at gate. Pilot suspended pending review. Black executives' viral encounter sparks industry reckoning. She looks to her own Socrates for answers. On June 16, 2003, Patterson speaks out. He tried not to read the comments, but some found their way to him, and most of them didn't end kindly. "I'd like to start," said the woman in the center of the panel. Her badge read T. Jennings Operations Ethics. "Captain Reardon, You've served Skyward Atlantic for 14 years, correct? Yeah. And before that? United States Air Force, retired as major. She nodded. Thank you for your service. There was a pause. What happened at Gate C-12 on the morning of June 3rd? He exhaled. Carefully. I observed a woman standing near the first-class boarding lane. She appeared out of place. No visible status indicators, no formal attire. I asked the gate agent to verify her ticket. When that process seemed to stall, I made the judgment call to tad the pass? The third panelist asked. He was legal, not operations. His tone was colder. Intended to deactivate the boarding permission, yes. On what grounds? Suspicion of fraud. Unauthorized access to premium seating is a security concern. And did you consult with anyone before taking that action? Jennings leaned back. Do you now know who the passenger was? Yes, Reardon said, biting the word. Sasha Patterson. And had you known that at the time, would you have acted differently? He paused, then said, yes. That answer came too fast. And it wasn't the right one. Jennings tilted her head. So your standard of treatment depends on someone's identity. That's not what I meant, he said quickly. I meant I wouldn't have escalated the issue. It wouldn't have been necessary. But it was necessary when she was anonymous? He didn't answer. Outside the review chamber, in a far brighter part of the building, Sasha stood before a line of cameras and microphones. Behind her, a glass banner bore the logo of Skyward Atlantic. To her right stood David Knox. To her left, Kendra. She wore a navy suit. No hoodie this time. No joggers. Not because she wanted to look the part, but because today she was the part. And the world needed to see that clearly. Good afternoon, she began. I'd like to address the events of the last 48 hours. Not just for myself, but for every passenger who's ever been questioned for looking out of place. For every person who's had to justify their presence before being offered a seat. The room was silent. I founded Skyward Atlantic to elevate the flying experience. But elevation doesn't mean anything if it doesn't include dignity. This week I was publicly profiled by a member of my own staff, and that moment, caught on video, opened a conversation we can no longer ignore. She glanced at the crowd. This is not about revenge. This is about recognition. We will review our policies, we will retrain our personnel, and we will rebuild this culture, not because we were caught, but because we were wrong. Cameras flashed. Fingers typed furiously on phones. Live feeds lit up. One reporter raised a hand. Are you pressing charges? Sasha didn't blink. No. I'm pursuing reform. Will Captain Reardon be terminated? She paused. Captain Reardon's employment status is under review, but his fate is no longer the point. The system that allowed this behavior, that normalized it, that's what we're changing. Behind the press line, Kaylee Simmons stood on tiptoe, recording again, this time with her face visible. She wasn't hiding anymore. In the HQ break room, flight crews from every route gathered around televisions. In lounges, hotel lobbies, waiting rooms, everyone was watching. This wasn't just another CEO giving a press statement. This was a reckoning. Sasha stepped down from the podium without fanfare. She wasn't here to perform. She was here to lead. Back in the hearing room, Reardon had gone silent. His once commanding voice had lost its thunder. Do you believe, Jennings asked finally, that you acted without bias? He hesitated. I believed I was following safety protocol, he said. But in hindsight, I see how it looked. And what do you see now? He swallowed. I see someone I didn't recognize, and I made a judgment. Jennings exchanged a glance with the other panelists. Captain Reardon, she said, you will be placed on indefinite suspension. You'll be offered the opportunity to participate in mandatory restorative leadership training, public accountability dialogue, and a full review of company anti-bias policy. Completion of these does not guarantee reinstatement. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Hearing adjourned. At the end of the day, Sasha sat alone in her office overlooking the city, shoes off, her feet curled beneath her on the couch. Her phone buzzed. A text from Eli. "Standing offer if you ever want a seat on our board. The view's pretty nice from here, too." She replied simply, "Let's change the altitude industry-wide." Her eyes shifted to the window. Planes cut silently across the sky in the distance, little white threads weaving the edges of the world together. There was still work to do, but tonight she allowed herself one breath of peace. The hush inside Skyward Atlantic's international flagship lounge was almost reverent. Sunlight poured through the high windows in pale gold beams, warming the dark oak floors and velvet seating with soft elegance. Just outside, aircraft taxied across the tarmac with mechanical grace. But inside, the atmosphere pulsed with something quieter, more human: anticipation. Sasha Patterson stood at the far end of the lounge beside a glass display case that was still shrouded under a silver satin cloth. Her expression was composed, but beneath that stillness was a kind of breathless calm, the same calm she'd felt during takeoff years ago on her first solo flight. Back then, it was just her, the yoke, and the sky. Now it was her name, her company, and a world that had finally begun to listen. She wore a simple dress, navy blue, the same color as the airline's livery. No pearls, no flashy jewelry. She didn't need the symbols of power. She was the symbol now. Behind her, rows of journalists, employees, board members, and a few invited guests filled the space. Familiar faces lined the crowd. David Knox near the press pit, Kendra perched beside a small podium reviewing last-minute notes, and just beyond them, Eli Townsend sipping coffee with that same quiet smile he'd worn on the flight from New York. Sasha adjusted the hem of her sleeve. This wasn't just another PR event. It wasn't even about damage control anymore. It was about something rare. Vindication without bitterness. Justice without vengeance. Change without shame. The room dimmed slightly as the soft lighting shifted toward the main stage. Kendra stepped up to the mic, her voice calm and confident. "Good morning. Thank you all for joining us. In the past few weeks, our airline has experienced a moment of reckoning, one that, like turbulence, mid-slack, came without warning but demanded our full attention. And through that moment, a light was cast on issues long overlooked, not just in our company, but in our industry." She glanced toward Sasha. "But today is not about an incident. Today is about what we've chosen to do with it. Skyward Atlantic is proud to unveil a new initiative that will redefine the standards of equity and leadership in commercial aviation. And to do that, I'd like to welcome the woman whose vision built this airline and whose integrity is now rebuilding it, Miss Sasha Patterson." Applause rolled through the lounge, low and genuine. Sasha stepped forward, unhurried, her eyes sweeping the crowd once before settling on the podium. "Thank you," she said. "It's strange how one flight can change everything." A soft ripple of laughter broke the tension. "I've always believed the sky is the great equalizer. Up there, gravity doesn't care what you look like. The clouds don't ask about your title. But down here on the ground, we've created systems that do ask. Systems that filter, assume, and exclude. A few weeks ago, I experienced one of those filters, and I chose not to disappear quietly through it." She stepped aside and walked toward the display case. With a light tug, she pulled back the silver cloth. Inside was a scale model of a new aircraft. The paint was the same sleek metallic finish, the tail logo unchanged. But along the fuselage, a new message gleamed in polished steel font. The Patterson Standard, first class means everyone. A collective breath passed through the room. "We're launching a new certification program," Sasha explained. "Not just for crew or pilots, but for everyone. Gate agents, management, vendors, regional partners. It will be mandatory, and it will focus on anti-bias, inclusion, and dignity at every level of our operation. Because leadership isn't a title, it's a responsibility, and we're choosing to lead. Flashbulbs popped, hands scribbled notes, but no one interrupted. And, she added with a glance toward Kendra and David, we'll be partnering with several other airlines and regulatory bodies to begin discussions about making this a cross-industry expectation. Not a skyward thing, an everyone thing. Everyone right? Kendra said with a note of surprise. This time the applause came faster, louder. Kaylee Simmons stood near the back, phone in hand, filming again. This time she was smiling. Her first video had sparked the fire, but this was the light. A moment later, Eli approached the podium. I didn't plan to speak, he said, but Sasha gave me one of those rare things in business. Permission to say the right thing before it's easy. So here's what I'll say. This isn't just a victory for passengers who've been profiled or mistreated. This is a victory for every professional who's ever had to prove they belong twice as hard just to be treated half as well. This moment doesn't fix everything, but it changes the altitude. More applause. Sasha stepped forward again, taking the mic one final time. There's a reason I didn't fire Captain Reardon immediately, she said, quiet but firm. Because if all we ever do is remove people without examining what made their behavior possible, we miss the deeper correction. He's undergoing training. He may never return. That will be decided later. But the truth is, this story was never about one man. It was about what we allow and what we no longer will. There was no triumphant music, no dramatic monologue, just a simple nod, a quiet breath. And then Sasha stepped away from the podium and joined the crowd, not above them, not ahead of them, but among them. Later that evening, she stood alone on the airport observation deck, watching the night flights take off in streaks of silver against the violet sky. Her phone buzzed gently in her pocket. Messages from executives, civic leaders, even passengers from that now infamous Flight 309. But she didn't read them right away. Instead, she watched as a skyward Atlantic jet ascended into the dark, carrying strangers to somewhere new, somewhere far. The nose tilted upward, climbing into smooth air. Sasha Patterson smiled. This time, no one would ever question if she belonged up there, because now everyone knew she owned the sky.